Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show Beyond Borders. And today we are extremely honored and privileged to have one of the pioneer astrologer from the Western side in the astrology. And I am really honored to have Sir James Braha for this on Bharat TV. So let's welcome Mr. Sir James Braha. Sir, very warm welcome to the Bharat TV and Bharat FM and my show Beyond Borders. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So, sir, it's like your books are really famous in India and here and everywhere. These books are like giving different kind of insights to the astrologers regarding astrology. We all know that you are based out of United States, but you went back to India. We heard so many stories and so many things, but would like to know from you that being here in United States, that time was not that high communication was available, no internet. What drew you to the Vedic astrology and to India, and how was your time there?
Okay, I'll explain that. And let me say, let me make a comment on what you said about how times have changed. When I used to do Vedic astrology starting in 1980, I went to India in 1982, so I started practicing in 1983. And if I saw a person had planets in the 12th house, I would say, positive, good planets in the 12th house, I would say you have the ability to travel to remote foreign lands, exotic foreign lands. I have the moon in the 12th house. I was able to travel. There is no such thing as an exotic foreign land anymore. People go to India. They say, oh, let's go to India next month. And they get on a plane and go to India. When I went to India in 1982, people said, oh my God, he's going to India. Oh my God, he's going halfway around the world. It was completely different. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
what brought me to India was that I was an actor in college. But then when I was around 20 years old, still in college, I started transcendental meditation. And I got heavily into meditation, went to Switzerland to learn to become a teacher of meditation. And I became familiar, my guru was Indian, so I became familiar with the Indian culture. Um, there was no mention of astrology except once. There was one mention, somebody asked about it, and they said, well, it's the 8th chapter of the Vedas. That's all they said. There was nothing said about astrology. Then I taught meditation from 20 to 27 years old. Then when I was around 27 or 28, I wound up getting divorced. And uh, at the time, my wife was in a play with a dancer who was an astrologer. And I went to see that astrologer. She made some predictions that were so accurate. And that started me on the path of astrology. And then, so I was studying astrology for, 3-4 years. And I had read about Indian astrology. I'd read about, and I'd even picked up some books, but I couldn't use them. They were pretty worthless for a Western mind, the way they're presented. So I had hit Rahu Dasha. When I hit Rahu Dasha, I got divorced and my father died all in the space of 2 or 3 years. So during the time, it was very depressing when my father died. I was very close to my father and I was very depressed. And I said, and I had just gotten divorced. And I said, I've always wanted to go to India. I'm not getting anything accomplished because I was so unhappy. So I said, let me go to India. And I brought with me about 25 horoscopes because I was obsessed. I was obsessed with Western astrology, but I wouldn't practice it because I couldn't predict enough. I'm not talking, the Western system's really good at predicting future events, but the Western system's not very good, in my opinion. At least I was never able to really predict the number of children, what the marriage would be, what the career would be. I couldn't do that with the Western system. Mainly, I think the house systems are not so good. Anyway, so I went to India and people said, are you going to learn Hindu astrology? I said, well, if it's possible. I didn't know if it was possible. I went around India for 2.5 months. I went around India. I got some readings. They were not impressive. There was one impressive feature. One astrologer said, "You're going to write books." And I thought he was crazy. I was 31. I had never written. But I was an actor, so I was good with language. But I never thought about writing. So that was accurate, but I wasn't impressed by anybody. I went back. I started in Delhi, went to Kathmandu, went to Agra, went to Benares, went to um, what's the place where the Krishna devotees are?
Mathura.
Mathura. Went to Mathura, walked around Parimarga, Marg. And
Parikrama, that's yeah.
yeah. It was wonderful. So and then I got back to Delhi, and I was going to be in Delhi for 3 weeks until I came home. And one day I woke up with a huge desire. I said, I've got to learn Hindu astrology. So I went and started picking up the classic books, which were useless. But the shopkeeper said, "What are you doing?" I said, I've got to learn this. He said, "You can't learn that way, but I'll bring you to Santanam." Santanam was becoming famous by translating scriptures, but he could use the money because I was giving maybe 100 rupees a night, which was $10, which was a lot of money in 1982. So he taught me for about 4 or 5 weeks, 3 hours a night, 4 hours a night. And then I went home, and then I was practicing. Then I went back to India and got another teacher, Padia, who was not a scholar, but he'd been in the field practicing. And the thing about Padia was that he was not a scholar. He's still alive, by the way. He's in Bombay, but he's not practicing anymore. He's older. But he's not a scholar. But he practiced astrology the way astrology is supposed to be practiced. I have been writing these books for 40 years now, and now I have a class. I finally got around to doing a video class, which is 12 sessions. They're an hour and 20 minutes each, approximately an hour and 20 minutes each. I analyze 50 horoscopes, but not the way Santanam and not the way Padia did. With Santanam and Padia, I would put the charts in front of them, they'd look at them, and they'd start analyzing it. In my classes, I took charts. I went through lots of charts to find which 50 charts I wanted to do, and I would study them beforehand so that the classes are really, really intricate. But here's the thing. The biggest frustration I have now these days is that I get emails from people reading my books, and they ask me questions as if my answer is going to be the word of God. Now, I can give you 45 years of experience and tell you, when I've seen this, this is what it means. When I've seen that, this is what it means. But that is not the way you do astrology. The way that you do astrology is you learn what the planets mean. You learn what the houses mean. You learn what the aspects mean. And then you analyze, you use your own thinking. You don't run to the teacher and say, "What does this mean? Tell me what that means. Tell me what," because you'll never get anywhere. So it becomes, and that's how I got where I got. When I was in India, when Padia and Santanam would say things, if they didn't make sense to what I knew from Western astrology, I would challenge them. I'd say, "Wait a minute, how can that be?" Because that's how you learn. You don't learn by, "Oh, the teacher said this, so that's the way it is." Nobody's 100% accurate. Nobody. And in India, many times Santanam or Padia would say something very accurate, because these were 25 horoscopes that I knew the people. They were relatives. They would say something extremely accurate, but I'd say, "You can't know that from the chart." I said, "Where are you getting that from?" And many times it was psychic ability. I'd say, "Where are you getting it from?" And then they would struggle to find it in the horoscope because it maybe wasn't really there. So that is the most important lesson. That's why in the classes that I give, I'm trying to explain the thought process, how you get to understand. That is the most important thing. So I went to India, learned, but that's how I got there.
Okay. So like when you were explaining that part, you use the term psychic. So what do you mean by that? The kind of psychic of, if someone is psychic, how the person would know? Or is it like
For
we have?
example, for example,
Yes.
I was doing a chart about a week ago, doing a horoscope reading. And while I'm doing the reading, it suddenly comes to my mind, doctor, medical.
Okay.
Now, I had studied the chart. When I do a horoscope reading, I study it in the morning hours while I'm eating breakfast, while I'm running errands. I study the chart for an hour or two, on and off, not straight, but on and off for an hour or two, until I get the feeling that I know who this person is, that I know mainly what the karma is. Once I get that, I can set the chart down. And then when I start reading the chart, information will in the horoscope, I'll start seeing things that I hadn't seen before. It comes alive. In this particular instance, I'm reading the chart and suddenly the term doctor or medical comes up. Now I keep talking about the things I'm saying. This is in this house, but as I'm talking, I'm looking to see is this person a doctor? Is there medical in there? And turns out she's a doctor. But it was not obvious from the horoscope. There were other things that were more obvious. Now that's a psychic impression. That's a psychic impression. And when I get so let me go back all the way to 1979, 1980. When I was studying astrology, I had a teacher named Larry Sands. He was very good. And he taught a class in astrology, and he taught Kabbalah, and he taught a class on psychic phenomenon. He taught all these different classes. I took the class on psychic phenomenon, and I found that I was pretty good at it. But I was mainly obsessed with astrology. So in this class, he said, okay, everybody take a partner. Take a partner. And you take the partner, and he says, okay, one person, give the partner an object that has been on you, like a ring, like a necklace. Let them hold it and see what they come up with. So I was with this guy. He hands me his watch or something. I'm holding the watch, and suddenly I start saying this story. I say, you have a girlfriend, and she she really likes you, but you don't know that she likes you. And I'm thinking, where is this coming from? And I don't know, am I making it up? I don't know. The guy says, that's what everybody tells me. I knew right then and there that I had psychic ability. And I knew right then and there that's not what I wanted to do. I had no interest in that. The reason I had no interest in that is because I don't know when I'm saying something like that whether it's accurate. How am I supposed to know? If I have a horoscope, and by now, my horoscope readings, anything that I'm teaching in my classes, in my books, should be 70% accurate. Nothing's 100%. But the way I work, I will not even use a technique like Vargotama. It doesn't work 70% of the time. Nietzsche Bunga doesn't work 70. So I will not use them. I don't want to be wrong 70% of the time. I want to be, Nietzsche Bunga works maybe 3 out of 10 times. I don't want to use Nietzsche Bunga if I'm going to be wrong 7 out of 10 times. So I don't use it. So I want to use what's in the horoscope, because once I get to know what I'm doing, 70% of what comes out of my mouth is going to be accurate. Actually, when I'm doing readings, I'll tell a person, like, if I'm doing a reading and I start saying something really harsh, like, oh, the relationships are going to be difficult, or the confidence, I will always say to them, now look, I could be right, I could be wrong. Astrology is about 70%, but this is what it looks like. They always tell me, no, you're exactly accurate. Because if I'm not really confident, I'm not going to say it.
Yes.
So I don't want to use the psychic ability. But Indians, I believe that, first of all, every horoscope that I do, maybe 50% of my horoscopes are for Indians, because I've done 80 YouTube videos with Indian hosts. So when I'm doing, these readings for Indians, I'll be talking about what it looks like, what it seems to be. Nothing's 100% accurate, but I don't know. So that's what I do.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Just going from and that time taking that decision of going to India just to look around and let's see what will happen. It's really, yeah, it's a kind of interesting. It's like whenever we go through the charts, there are the 12 houses. There one term which is usually quite repeated is like uh, pun, Purva Punya, Prarabdh, Karma, like you mentioned that when you are watching or like when you are analyzing the chart, you see what are the karma or what are the something like that. And in West side, the term karma, the karma is very popular. People are using it a lot. What do you think? Like what in general, how that does impact that Purva Punya, and if the purv term means the past. So
I will tell you my understanding of it.
yes, please, please.
This came out because when I got divorced and my father died, I went into Rahu Dasha, but there were massive transits going on that really impacted me powerfully. I was a different person. Uranus was hitting my seventh house cusp. Pluto was conjuncting my sun. I was exploding with new energy around the age of 27, 28, 29. Around that time, I suddenly realized I was going to have a big career and maybe be famous. And this was on my mind all the time from the age of 27, 28, all the way to even through when I was in India with Santanam, it was still there. By the time I got to Padia, it was now 1983. I'd been living with this powerful sense of destiny for 5 years, but nothing was happening. And I said on the when I met Padia, he said, "Let me see your horoscope." He looks at it and he goes, "You got married at 21 or 23." I said, "Oh my God, this is the man I want to be teaching me." So he came to my room for 5 or 6 weeks every night. And the first night that I was there, the first night I said, "Look," because I knew this guy was accurate and this question was on my mind for 5 years. I said, "Look, I have this feeling I'm going to be famous or powerful or successful, but nothing is happening." Will it happen? If it's not, tell me that it will not happen and I'll stop thinking like that. He looks at it for a minute. He goes, "You will have fame." I said, "Why?" Because the 10th house ruler is in the house of Purva Punya, the fifth house. The fifth house is the house of Purva Punya. So he says, it's in the house of Purva Punya. It's aspected by Jupiter. You have earned it from past lives to have fame. Now, when I when I do a horoscope, I will look at the fifth house. I look at the whole chart. The entire chart is telling me the karma. The entire chart is telling me the karma is the person's going to have good relationships, good children, bad children, fame, not fame, money, not money. That's the whole chart. But if it's connected to the fifth house, which is Purva Punya, it must occur. And it could be bad, it could be good. If the 10th house ruler's in the fifth house but fallen, debilitated, there'll be a terrible career because specifically what they did in past lives. So I look at the Purva Punya house, the fifth house, to be karma that must occur in this life because you earned it from the past. The karma has been building up and it can't wait anymore. It's got to be paid off, positive or negative. If it's connected to the fifth house, if it's good karma in the fifth, connected to whatever house it's connected to, that karma must occur. It's been waiting too long. The other things in the horoscope, they're also likely to be accurate, but there's many things in the natal horoscope that are there but may not manifest. So when you use the term Purva Punya, then I'm thinking the karma, like my brother. I remember this. Padia was looking at my brother's horoscope, and my brother has Moon and Jupiter conjunct tightly in the fifth house in Jupiter's own sign, Sagittarius. Moon conjunct Jupiter tightly in Jupiter's own sign, Sagittarius. He said, "This man is lucky." He said he has done very, very, very good, generous works in past lives, and it will get paid off in this life. Life will be easy for him because he's earned it. Now, if you have Jupiter Moon in the horoscope in general, that's a wonderful placement. Jupiter Sun, Jupiter Moon, those are wonderful in general. But if it's in the fifth house, connected to the fifth house, then that Purva Punya is going to be incredibly, it's going to manifest.
Okay. So, in that sense, the thing is, like, it means the past life exists, because people do question that, do you believe in past birth, or that do you believe that there was a past life before this life?
If
So,
you're an astrologer, you only have two choices. One choice is that life is completely random, and you're reading the heart. No, 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 no. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Because I struggle with this myself. When I wrote this book on Advaita, non-duality, living reality, because I studied with a non-dual master, Sailor Bob Adamson. He came to my house for 5 weeks. And when I got Advaita, non-duality, I came to one realization. And that realization is the only thing that I can absolutely positively know for sure, for certain, is that I am. The body's going to die. The thoughts are going to die. The feelings, everything about this James Braha is going to die and go away. The thoughts, the feelings, the body. But what's going to stay is the awareness or consciousness. Now, after being with him, after getting non-duality, I'm in touch with consciousness and awareness, which is with me all the time, which was never born, it never dies, and it's who I am. That's the only thing I can know for sure. Everything else is a conclusion, a belief, and a concept. So I struggle with past lives. I struggle with that. So I have two choices. I know that I can predict people's lives because I have the horoscope. So I have two choices. A person gets born, the dream is going on, and it shows you what's going to happen. That's one possibility. The other possibility is I have a big career, I must have earned it from a past life. So I choose to believe that if people are poor, it's because of what their karma is from the past. So I believe that. Can't prove it. Cannot prove it. And I'll say more than that. I cannot know it. The only thing I can know, if I look for who am I, all I can find is awareness or consciousness. That's the only thing that is certain. Everything else is a concept and a belief. I believe there's past lives, but I can't prove it, and I can't really even know it. I can have faith in it. But look, it's certainly possible that the absolute decides to make a creation, and it makes a creation, and every time it makes a person, it makes some people happy, some people sad, some people rich, some people. It could do that, but I don't believe that. But it's possible.
yeah, good to know. Good to know this insight.
That's a
But
good question.
have you ever been encountered any person who remember their past lives and they come
Well,
to you for any help,
sure.
or what kind of experience such kind of people
Well,
can you share?
well, I'm not saying that I've had people who have great knowledge of their past lives, but look, let's say that you take Kalasarpa yoga.
Okay.
Kalasarpa yoga is fairly common. It's not as rare as you think.
Hmm.
Kalasarpa yoga is when all the planets are on one side of Rahu and Ketu.
Yes.
So if Rahu's in Aries and Ketu's in Scorpio, all the planets are between Aries and Scorpio. That's Kalasarpa.
Yes.
The meaning of Kalasarpa is that you killed a pregnant snake in a past lifetime. I don't take that as literal, I take it symbolic.
Okay.
So a snake represents coiled up energy, and you killed it. A pregnant snake means it's not just potential energy, it's a pregnant snake. It's even more potential energy that you killed. So I take that to mean that the person destroyed potential energy in a past life, and it has its consequences. The consequences are the person's life can go way up to the top, way down to the bottom. The person may have certain features of their life that they have no control over. Everybody has things they have no control over, but Kalasarpa person, they have some big features, no control over. Okay, so um, many times I will say to the person, you destroyed energy in a past life. You destroyed potential in a past life. We don't know exactly what that means. You may have, I tell the client, you may have destroyed energy. Now, that could mean anything. It could mean you had great talent and refused to use it. It may mean that you were with people, loved ones or friends, and they had great potential and you ruined it for them. It may mean that you committed suicide. You destroyed the energy by committing suicide. If I told you how many people, when I make that statement, they say, I know I committed suicide in a past life. So they know they have some sense of some past life. That's as much as I'll say. I mean, there are people who have that, but I don't have much to say except that there are people that know some things about their past lives.
I mean, I love the explanation of the thing, that it is not the literal killing the snake, but the meaning that you destroyed the some kind of higher energy, and
Not high,
then
just potential energy.
that's
And
a potential.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay. Yeah, good to know. That's a really new thing I have heard.
But you see, the reason that you don't know this, the reason that people don't know is because they take the scriptures like it's religion. They take the statements of their teachers like it's religion. This is not the way to become a great astrologer. I wrote this book, the Braha Sutras, in 2022. This came out. This is the Braha Sutras. I wrote this book because I had given a workshop at the Vedic Astrology Conference in 2019. And I spent a year working on that workshop. That's how crazy I am, knowing that I've got to give a workshop. I worry about it. I worked on it for a year. When I was done, I said, you know what? I could make a book out of what I am teaching. For one weekend, I'm teaching. I could write a book from it. So I started writing the book. Sutra number 1 was, if a technique does not work 70% of the time, stop using it. Vargotama does not work for me 70% of the time. I will not use it. Nichabanga doesn't work. There's lots of things that do not work that are in the scriptures. They do not work. I will not use them. I put that as the number 1 sutra. Well, as I was writing, the number 8 sutra, number 8 was, the thought process is what matters, not what some guru says, not what the scripture says, not what your teacher says. It's you figuring it out. So when I heard that Kalasarpa means you killed a pregnant snake, I said, what is so bad about killing a pregnant snake? But I began to think about it, to reason it. That's what Padya used to do. Padya blew my mind one night, because he said to me, now he knows Vedic astrology, he knows nothing of Western astrology. And one night he says, I have marked it. I have noticed that if planets are in the same degree, they're aspecting each other. Now, in the Vedic system, Mars aspects the 4th, the 7th, and the 8th. Saturn's aspects the 3rd, the 7th, and the 10th. But in Western astrology, that's not how it works. He had noticed from his experience that if planets were in the same sign, they could be 5 houses away, 4 houses away, 3 houses away. There's an aspect there. He just knew from his experience, his looking and his thinking. Okay, so I told my wife, at some point, I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the Braha Sutras, and I'm going to put that sutra, number 8, the thought process is what matters the most. I'm going to put that as number 1. So when you get these texts and these things, you have to think about them. And, when you're doing horoscopes, like Padya would say to me sometimes, like, I was just telling somebody the other day, his second house was very bad. He knows Western astrology. This guy got a reading, doesn't know Hindu, but he knows the Western. And I said, your second house is very bad. So your family life growing up was terrible. And then I say, now look, when I was told, and I was accurate, I said, when Padya or Santanam told me that the second house was family life, I nearly fell off my chair. In Western, it's the 4th house. What does the second house have to do with family life? It makes no sense to me. But Padya would say, you take it from me. I have marked this. When he said, you take it from me, I have marked this, that's it. I would say, okay, whether it makes sense or not, I'm going to go with it and see if it works, because he's going by experience, not by what somebody told him. So as I get older, I didn't 10 years ago, if somebody said, "What's the answer to this?" I'd give them the answer. Now, if they say, "What's the answer to this?" I say, "Think about it. Think about it. Don't ask me. Think about it. Tell me what you think, and then I'll answer." Because I want people, if they're going to be astrologers, they've got to be able to work it out for themselves. It won't work otherwise.
Okay, so I have a question here. Suppose a person is coming to you, you are explaining this all things to the person, but does it depend how open or how in the sync with the nature or the universe the person is for their thinking ability? Does it depend on that factor, or no? Everyone can think the same.
Wait, are you asking that when a client comes to you,
Yes.
if the chart is not matching, is that what you're asking? If the chart indicates one thing but the person's not getting it, is that what you're asking?
No, no. I'm what I'm trying to ask. Like, suppose the client is going to the astrologer every time. Two different astrologers are saying two or three different things. Like someone having the different reason for that or explanation for that, and some other is saying some other thing. So when there are two astrologers, how does that change by person to person in terms of prediction with that one sutra, like taking that Kal Sarpa Yoga as a
I,
snake, or
I got your question.
yeah.
So there's a lot of answers to this. The most generous answer is that each astrologer is going to be talented at different things. Like, there are questions that people will ask me, and I'll say, I'm not the right astrologer for that question, because in 45 years, I still can't determine certain things. There's certain issues, and I've looked, I've thought, I've experimented, and certain things I will not get, because that's the astrologer I am. And so the most generous answer is that one astrologer is good at one thing and the other astrologer is very good at another. Like, if somebody asks me about death, when am I going to die? I don't look at that. I don't study it. There are astrologers that will study that. They'll be good at that. That's the most generous I can say. The most, genuine answer that I can give you is that there are very few good astrologers. I will say there are very few good astrologers. And so what happens is that if the astrologer is not good, they're going to get the things that are obvious, that are really clear and really obvious, and they're going to be wrong in a lot of what they say. If you took two really good, capable astrologers that were very experienced and very knowledgeable and had good teachings, they're likely to come up with the same interpretations.
Okay.
If they're two very good astrologers, they're likely to come up with the same explanations of the horoscope, if they're both very good. The problem is that so few astrologers have had good training, and worse, so few astrologers are willing to think things through for themselves. They prefer to go to the books and listen to the teachers and listen to the scriptures, which will not be accurate.
Okay. Get it. So what you are trying to say, that taking their own experiences, making their own practices, makes the concept more clear.
No, only if they're serious. You know, there's a sutra that I wanted to write in that book
Okay.
that I didn't put in because I was thinking of it in a very nasty way. I was thinking we have a term in America, full of crap. But most people are full of crap. What that means is they're not serious. So I wanted to put that in the book because most people are full of crap. They're not serious people. I could have done it if I had reasoned it out. I could have said most people, more than 50% of the people in the world, are not serious people. They'll tell you they're serious, but they're really not. They're not willing to be dedicated. They're not willing to be responsible. They're not willing to push. The reason I got good at astrology is because I'm obsessed with the truth. I'm obsessed with finding the truth, not just with astrology, but with everything in life. That's why I said to you, as much as I believe that there are past lives, I cannot know that. Why did I say that? Because I'm so serious and obsessed with the truth. And the truth is, I can't know anything except I am awareness and consciousness. Everything else is a concept and a belief. But I only got to that point by being serious, by pushing and pushing and pushing. And most people are not serious. They'll say they are, but they're not. If you get, so it's not just that the person's going by their own, I mean, if they're going by their own experience, that's good if they're serious. If they see it once, oh, I saw once that a person that had Saturn in the fifth house had this happen. Therefore, everybody who has it, that's not being serious.
Yes.
That's not being serious. So they have to be serious and go by their own experience. Then, yeah, they're going to get it. They're going to get it. So when I'm doing horoscopes now, and it's taken a long time, when I teach this in the classes, I go over, so that people, I do 50 horoscopes to show them how it works. But once I do that, like if I'm looking at a horoscope, if somebody tells me, oh, I had a horoscope done by this astrologer and they said blah, 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 and I look at the chart and it's not there, then I know that other astrologer is not a serious astrologer. They're not experienced enough, because astrology is actually not as hard as it seems. What is hard, I mean, like the way I structured my classes, it's 12 classes. The first class is about the first house. And I use a chart with a good first house, a bad first house, and a confusing first house. And I go over what's making this first house confusing. I go over what's making this first house great, what's making this first house bad. I go for all 12 houses. So if I'm doing a horoscope and I see something that is crystal clear, that is very good about a particular house or planet, there's nothing that some other astrologer can say that's going to negate what I have found. It's not likely to happen. So in other words, it is an art, but it's also a science. But because it's an art and it's a psychic art, astrologers are very gullible. They will believe all kinds of things. They're not serious enough, and they're not skeptical enough. So I have a sutra in that book about being skeptical. So if I see something happen a few times, like for example, people will constantly say things like, "Oh, well, I was in the Venus Bhukti, and money got stolen," or "I was in the Venus Bhukti and I had a car accident, so the Venus Bhukti caused the car accident." What the heck does Venus have to do with a car accident? But because it happened in the Venus Bhukti, oh, it must have been Venus that caused it. That's a lack of thinking. And that is what makes me, that's why I write these books. That's why I teach these classes. But my patience is getting, as I get older, my patience is being tried by people who say they're serious and are not serious.
Yes, I get you completely here. And when you were talking in the start, I want to take a flashback there, that you said that while in the practice of 45 years, now you are realizing that you are the one and conscious. So, do you think that astrology is the path to take you to the spirituality? Does both of these connect the dots?
Oh,
Or
God.
how do you see the spirituality now at this point of life? I want to know that.
There's astrologers where you walk in the room and they're smoking cigarettes and drinking beer. It's got nothing. Being a predictor of life, being an astrologer, someone who wants to be in the eighth house is metaphysics. Your ninth house religion could be very weak. You could have a great eighth house and be an astrologer. The 12th house for enlightenment could be very weak. You have no interest in enlightenment and you're in astrology. So you're asking me, I didn't understand exactly. I needed to get that out, that a person could be very, very psychic and metaphysical without being spiritual at all. Was there some other question you had about the talking about the enlightenment or the awareness? You had some other.
Okay. I just take it like that way, that in your process of astrology, does that help you to realize the fact of life or the purpose of life or any in the higher terms?
So astrology is a very fascinating profession, and it brings all kinds of thinking processes in. But in my 12 classes, I talk about my horoscope kind of all the way throughout the sessions. I'll put it up and talk about it. People think because I have this great astrological career, they think James Braha, they think astrology. That's not what my life was about. My life was about the truth. My life was about enlightenment and the truth. So I got into meditation at the age of 20. I didn't even know about astrology until I was 27, 28, and I had a first reading, and it was very accurate. Astrology is my dharma. It's what I do. Enlightenment is what my life was about. So in these classes, when I'm teaching people about how to analyze horoscopes, I keep telling them, you're not just looking for the karma and what the person does. You want to know who they are. So if you did my horoscope accurately, and I can tell you, neither of my mentors ever looked at my horoscope and said, there's no question you're an astrologer. None of them even saw that. I got that as I, learned and learned and learned. I got that. But when I teach the classes, I teach them, here's the karma, here's the karma, here's the karma. But you want to know more than just the karma. You want to know, who is this person? Who are they? So in my case, who I am is someone who's obsessed with truth and enlightenment. Astrology is just what I do. It's my job. It's my dharma. So I was going toward enlightenment way before I was going toward astrology. Astrology came along. I got obsessed with it. It became my dharma. It's clear from the horoscope. It is my dharma. The 10th ruler career is in the 5th house, aspected by Jupiter within minutes, and Jupiter rules the 8th house. That's my dharma. But who I am is a seeker of truth and a seeker of enlightenment. So the astrology does not do much for the enlightenment, but it's very fascinating and it's very interesting, and I've drawn lots of conclusions. Whether I had the astrology or not, I was going toward moksha. And I did not just meditation, I did every self-improvement technique you could do from the age of 20 to 53. At 53, I read this book by this Australian Advaitin. He's a Westerner that studied with Nisargadatta Maharaj. First, he went to India. Sailor Bob Adamson went to India, and he was with Muktananda. He was in a bookstore picking up books, and the guy said, look, if you're interested in enlightenment, forget about Muktananda. You got to go see Nisargadatta. He went to Nisargadatta. He studied with Nisargadatta. He came back. He started teaching it. I was in America. I read 10 pages of his book, and I said, I've got to go see this guy. But I couldn't get on a plane to do that because I had had a panic attack on a plane, and I didn't want to get on planes for long distances. So I actually brought him to my house for 5 weeks. And that's how passionate I was about moksha, about enlightenment. And so that's when I got and after that, people send me chapters of spiritual books. They got to see, you got to read this spiritual book. Every time you read a spiritual book, it looks like ABC, ABC, ABC. There's nothing new. Once you know who you are, there's nothing new. But the astrology is interesting and it's fascinating. Astrology is way more fascinating than moksha. But moksha is liberation. Moksha is freedom. Up until I did all the meditation you could do. I did every technique you could do. And if you talk to me at the age of 52, I would tell you I'm still suffering like crazy. And all of that meditation and all of those techniques, they didn't put a dent. They didn't make one bit of difference to the feeling of separation. I could do meditation. I could do any therapies. I did a million different things. That sense of separation never ended. There was me and there was God. There was me and there was others. Once I understood who I am, I'm awareness or consciousness, that sense of separation's gone. The freedom is there. Astrology is way more interesting and fascinating. It never ends. But once you know your true nature, that's it. You don't go any further than that. You may have, if you may develop special techniques or become psychic, but once you actually gain freedom, that's it. There's nothing left. Game is over. The astrology is more interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that's your happy point where after reaching you feel freedom and happiness.
No, not happiness. Freedom.
Freedom. So
Freedom.
what do you say
Happiness.
to happiness?
Wait. This is important. Sorry.
No,
I'm a
no, no. Please go ahead, please.
I'm a teacher. You can see the passion. Happiness comes from the fourth house and Venus. So if a person has a good fourth house and a good Venus, they're happy. You see people walking around with smiles on their faces. I'm not one of those people that walks around. My fourth house is afflicted. My Venus is afflicted. So I look real happy on these videos because I love talking about this. But if you're with me all day long, you don't see a person with a big smile on his face. That's not me. There are people, I see them, they walk around with a smile on their face. They're happy. That's the fourth house in Venus. Liberation gives you freedom. If you want to ask me what makes me happy, my family makes me happy. Um, like when I came out with that book, the Braha Sutras, it was the happiest time of my life. When I came out with my first book, I was, oh my God, I wrote a book. It was thrilling. But when I came out with the Braha Sutras, I didn't expect that. That book took everything I learned in 40 years of astrology and put it in one book. And I'd be driving in my car and I'd look at the book and I can't believe that I managed to get everything I learned in that one book. It was thrilling. It made me happy. So what makes me happy is doing something that makes a difference in the world, that helps people, that helps them, that educates them. That makes me happy. A happy person, they don't have to do anything. They walk around happy their whole life. If I get a horoscope where Venus and Jupiter are in the fourth house, in Libra or in Cancer, where Venus is in its own, or Jupiter's exalted, I say to that person, you're going to be happy no matter what happens. You could get divorced, you're still happy. You could have a lousy career, you're still happy. That's not me. If I can't make a difference in the world and help people and have a big career, I'm really going to be unhappy. It's really going to be
Oh, great, great answer in that terms of like saying happiness and the freedom.
contentment. Happiness, contentment. So
Oh,
if the chart doesn't have happiness, bad fourth house, bad Venus, happiness is not going to be there. It's not going to be a sweet, easy life. I tell those people, you will be content. You will be content if you can do something that helps the world or something that your horoscope is indicating. You know, maybe not be happiness, but it may be big travel, big philosophy, or being a doctor. That'll bring them their contentment. But happiness is going to be elusive if Venus and the fourth house are weak.
okay. I would like to take it little further. So, like when people coming to you, the clients are coming to you, major issues like health, career, relationship, money. So, in that term, what with the every ascendant, is there any kind of remedy or something you can tell in general? Like we can see so many videos out there because of the Mars transit into the Cancer. So, anything you can tell the viewers about that with the ascendant movement?
Wait,
How,
about how to fix the problem? Is that what you're asking?
no, like usually there are like if some suppose Mars is moving to Cancer now in that transit period of time, what they can expect?
What's the question? I don't understand the question. So if a bad transit is coming,
Yeah. So suppose the recent the major transit is which is talked about is like transit of Mars into the Cancer. When that Mars is transiting into the Cancer, in that time, what the native can expect, or if they are
well,
expecting.
so there's a book. So there's a book that I wrote on transits. That's this is a book on. It's called. The actual title is How to Predict Your Future.
Okay,
How to Predict Your Future: Secrets of Eastern and Western Astrology. That's the actual title.
okay,
And it
okay.
says,
I can see that. I can see that.
okay. So if you want to know about transits, you read the book on what transits generally do. Is that what you're? I mean, are you at? First of all, I don't use transits of Sun, Moon, Venus, Mars. I don't use them. I use the transits of Jupiter and Saturn. That's what I use. Some people
Right.
also use Rahu and Ketu. The transits of Mars, now, if Mars is going to conjunct a planet, there might be something happen, but it's difficult enough to be accurate if I'm just using the major planets of Jupiter going through a house for a year, Saturn going through a house for 2.5 years. Then I have something to talk about. Mars going through a house for, I don't know, a month or two, or Venus going through a house, it's not enough to make anything predictable 70% of the time. I'm lucky if I can get 70% from Jupiter or Saturn. Now, if Jupiter or Saturn are conjuncting a planet, Saturn's conjuncting the sun, Saturn's squaring the moon, opposing Venus, I can make predictions about that. That's what that book on transits is about. But Mars going through a house, I've read the books on them. I had books too when I was studying. They didn't work. They didn't work predicting Venus going through a house, Mars going through a house. Does it have an effect? Yeah, it has some effect, but it's not enough to make something, predictable 7 out of 10 times, not even 5 out of 10 times. Those planets don't work for me. But if you want a book on that, book is Jupiter and Saturn through the houses, Jupiter and Saturn, and Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto through the houses, and aspecting the planets in their transits. That book took me more time than any other book. It took over a year. There's like 400 different transits in that book.
Okay.
But
So the reason of asking that question, that like we were started talking on the point, that time you traveled to India was not that technology. In these days, when we open the YouTube, there are like 100 of astrologers explaining the same thing, like transit of Mars. The whole thing is filled up with that. So the question came into my mind that why shouldn't I ask you that
yeah,
what.
yes, so I'm gonna tell you one of the sutras in the Braha Sutras. One of the sutras is the internet is the best, the internet is the worst. The internet is the best. If I have a health problem, I can start researching how to fix myself on the internet. But if I look, I don't go to watch astrological videos, but I have clients that tell me what they learned on videos on the internet, and I want to throw up. I want to vomit from the nonsense that they tell me. That doesn't mean they're all nonsense. There's a lot of nonsense going on the internet. A lot of nonsense, more than you can imagine. So that is why sutra number 1 is you must be able to reason it out for yourself. You can't listen to these. So when I tell you Venus and the 4th house is happiness, you should not take my word for that. What am I? I'm a person on the internet. You should start to study it and see whether it works. That's how it works. But there's a lot of, that's why I told you, if I'm doing a horoscope for something and I see something very clearly and they tell me, but this other astrologer said this, once in a while I go, oh, wow, that's an interesting thing. 80% of the time I say they just don't know what they're doing. Because I know after 40 years, I know what I'm doing. So they better have, I'll tell you a good one. When I see Mars fallen in Cancer and the moon fallen in Scorpio,
Okay.
those are both, so that's an exchange of signs. Now
Yes.
I consider that a terrible exchange of signs because they're both fallen. But some astrologers will say they're both fallen, but the exchange of signs is going to be so good that it becomes good. Now that's something where my logic told me that how can it be good if they're both fallen?
Yeah.
But from experience, I have seen some cases where even though they're both fallen, they're working and the person's making money. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So most of the times, like if I'm doing a horoscope and people tell me, well, I heard this on the internet, I heard that on the internet, it's nonsense. But once in a while, they'll say something and I'll say, well, I'll have to consider that. And then I'll go back and I'll start looking, but that's very rare. It's just rare.
Okay. So
That
like when people are checking all the times and that like this transit is going to happen, how this gonna change this ascendant, and that's all. It's not majorly affecting until it's the planet like Jupiter or Saturn.
that's right. Now look, if Mars hits your ascendant or Mars hits your moon, you could have an accident.
Okay.
If you predict for 10 people when Mars is going to hit their moon or their ascendant, you're going to be wrong 9 times.
Yes.
How can you use it? You could say, look, I better warn you. But I have enough to say in an hour-long session about things that are 70% likely to happen. I don't need those things that are, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sure. Mars hit my moon some months ago, and I had this big explosion of anger at somebody who's doing something wrong. That was Mars conjuncting the moon, but that doesn't happen every time Mars hits the moon. But it's going to have some effect. But
Okay.
those are minor. Those are minor. Look, here's another thing. Astrologers want to get clients, and so they have monthly newsletters. Monthly, you'll get advertisements from their website saying, "Here's what the month of March is. Here's what the month of April is." 80% of that's just garbage. It's just garbage. If you hold those people's predictions to the fire, they're going to be wrong 80% of the time, maybe 90. They're just nonsense. Mundane astrology is near impossible. Mundane astrology is predicting an earth. Well, earthquakes may be easier because that's more about planets affecting the earth scientifically. But most predictions, there's going to be a stock market crash, there's going to be a depression, there's going to be most of that stuff is just nonsense. And if you read that person's April and May and June and July predictions, they're going to be wrong most of the time. And what they'll do is when one of them is right, they splatter, I told you this was going to happen. They were wrong 10 times, right once, and they tell everybody how accurate they were when it happened.
Yeah.
I don't do that. If there was anybody that could do mundane astrology well, the whole world would know about them. Nostradamus did that long ago, we assume from the writings. Um, Edgar Casey was a man in the 50s and 60s who made predictions that were extremely accurate. That guy got hit in the head, right over here where the chakra is. He got hit in the head. After he got hit in the head, he would go into a trance and he would tell you all about your physical health problems. And he would make predictions. He said that Miami, I was raised in North Miami Beach, Miami was a very small town. In the 50s, he predicted Miami would be a huge international port, and it became that in the 70s and 80s. But when he came out of his trance, he couldn't remember anything he said. So that was from being hit in the head. The chakra opened. There was a woman in the 60s named Jean Dixon who made tremendous predictions, but she also made a lot of wrong predictions. She was the best. And she called herself an astrologer, but she was really psychic. She was really psychic. For her to predict, okay, what were you going to say?
Mm, I was just about it. What's the difference between the psychic and the astrologer? What planet make you psychic, and what planet makes you majorly the astrologer? Because
Same
both
thing.
are
They're
different.
the same. They're the same thing. That's why when I got in the room in that class and I hold this guy's watch, I immediately started having psychic because it was a job. Okay, so look, there's different. You can see whether a person's psychic or not from the horoscope. If Uranus is very prominent, they will be psychic very suddenly. They'll have sudden insight suddenly. That's Uranus. It just comes to them. If Neptune is very prominent, Neptune is very prominent for me. Neptune is right next to the sun. So I will feel things. Neptune is a higher octave of Venus. So Neptune with my sun, it makes me feel like if I'm in a room, I feel the energies. That's not Uranus. I have friends who have strong Uranus and suddenly something just comes out of their mouth. They don't know why it came out. They didn't feel it. It just came out. That's Uranus. Neptune is you feel it. Pluto is also something where if Pluto's prominent in my chart, and Pluto also makes you have this deep, 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 intense, profound feeling. So that's how that psychic stuff works. But look, if I do a horoscope and the eighth house is very prominent, I'm going to say to them, I'm not going to know whether they're going to be great at astrology or great at psychic. I'm going to say, look, you got the moon and Jupiter in the eighth house in a great sign, Taurus or Cancer. You're going to be psychic, metaphysical, astrological. If you want to practice astrology, you can. Your eighth house is so strong that you could do this without the horoscope. You could just be psychic. But it's the eighth house, and it's Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. But to say, see, in my case, it's clear that I would be an astrologer. But Saturn and Sun are in the fifth house, the house of the mind. Saturn and Sun are in the house of the mind. When malefics are in the house of the mind, the person is skeptical. They are practical. If, Venus is in the fifth house, Jupiter's in the fifth house, the person is they're very happy-minded. They don't have to be serious-minded because they're happy. They're Sun in the fifth house, Mars in the fifth house, Rahu in the fifth house, Saturn in the fifth house. The person's practical, down to earth. They're not going to want to rely on psychic stuff. They're going to want to be skeptical. They're going to be skeptical. You have malefics in the fifth house at a very early age. You see how bad the world is. You have Mars, Saturn, Rahu, Sun in the fifth house, the house of the mind. You're very practical minded. By the age of 5 or 10, you say, wow, this world's really difficult. If you don't have those and you're very happy, you don't really notice how bad the world is for a long time. So if the malefics are in the fifth house, the person's not likely going to want to rely on psychic. They're going to want to be serious minded. They're more likely to go toward astrology or stuff. I was telling my wife today, it's a funny story.
Okay, please go ahead.
So it's Halloween tomorrow. Everybody's
Yes.
putting on a costume. I can never, my imagination doesn't allow me to go wild with imagination to figure what I should be for Halloween. And when I was an actor in college, I was a very good actor with a script. I could do a script. But if they said, we want you to do an improv and come up with some imagination thing, I was terrible. And I was telling her, I think the reason I can never think of what I want to be for Halloween, and I could never do those improvisations because my imagination wasn't so great. Technically, the imagination is the second house in astrology. But what I'm saying is I have Saturn and Sun, two malefics in the fifth house. And so it makes my mind more serious, not more gullible and imaginative. That's why I'm so skeptical. I'm skeptical. And here's maybe the most important lesson from this class, from this video. I keep saying that you have to be skeptical of the teachers, and you have to be skeptical of the scriptures and the books. Do you know who you really have to be skeptical with the most? Yourself. Yourself. Oh, look, this happened, and this occurred while Venus was here and Jupiter was here. This must be the connection. And you think, oh, I'm so great. I'm so great. I just figured it out. You have to be skeptical with yourself, like that, with your own conclusions. You have to say, I made this conclusion. Is it true? You have to be skeptical with yourself. And, for a person who's pursuing enlightenment, what's stopping you from enlightenment is that there's all these different phenomena. Enlightenment is about who am I? What's my true nature? The true nature is that it's all one. Awareness or consciousness has no beginning, no end. It's all one. It's not dual. That's why that's why they say Advaita. Advaita means not oneness. Advaita means not two. Not two. Because if you say one, there's a possibility of two. So they say not two. So the problem is that I'm seeing a cup, I'm seeing a video, I'm seeing a book, That's two, three, four, five. It's all duality. And you're looking for oneness, right? So the person gets caught up in money, in fame, in power, right? So you're pursuing enlightenment. And finally, you get to the point where you say, I don't care about money. It's not important. I don't care about fame. I don't care about power. That's not important. So you're not distracted from enlightenment by the power and the fame and the money after 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. That's not the issue. The issue is you're consumed with me, how great I am, who I am. I teach non-duality to people and they start asking me questions about how can I fix myself? What self are you talking about? There's a James who is a movie figure. That's the hardest one to. They can let go of power. They can let go of fame. But when you say you got to let go of the idea that you're a person, because the person is a body, thoughts, and feelings, and they're all going to be dead in 50 years. So there is no you, but that's what they're fascinated with. You got to let go of the idea that there's a James, that there's a you. There's not. All there is this oneness. That's all I can know is that I can identify, I can feel the emptiness or nothingness or consciousness. So you have to be skeptical with yourself, your astrological conclusions, and you have to be really skeptical that you're a human being. If you believe you're a human being, you're going to suffer. As soon as you let go of the idea that there's a real human being there, the suffering is going to end. Now I know there is no. What does it matter if James dies? There was never a James here to begin with. There was a body of thoughts and feelings. It's not real. So I'm not worried about a James dying because I realized my true nature is the emptiness, the awareness.
Wow. It became spiritual at the end. I mean, the end is the way you ended up, it's really heavy for me right now. I would not say it's not understandable, but it took a lot of my attention to understand.
It's perfectly understandable. You're not a woman. You're not an astrologer. You're not a person because that has no reality. It has no independent nature. It comes and it goes.
Yes,
Bhagavad Gita, it says you're looking for the self that cannot be cut by the sword and burned by fire.
yes.
You and I can be burned by fire and destroyed by a sword, but we're looking for the part that cannot be. This is not complicated. It's actually quite simple. The body and the thoughts and the feelings, they can be destroyed, but there's something there with you right now, all the time. You close your eyes and you go, yeah, there's that nothingness. There's that emptiness and that nothingness. When the whole world is destroyed in a ball of fire, it's irrelevant because the emptiness or the nothingness or the consciousness is still there. And the emptiness or the nothingness or the consciousness is likely to create a whole nother universe.
Wow. I'm really like in a different zone. So before concluding this, I would like to thank you here. It's not that I'm done with my questions. I could ask more and could go more. But for this episode, I would like to take a little break here
Sure, sure.
and just thank you so much for coming over, giving me the honor to have this vast knowledge and could go further with this medium.
My
So
pleasure. My
thank
pleasure. And if you find me too aggressive, I can't help it. I get
No, it is not. It is not aggressive. It is, I would say, a beautifully explained, honest way. So I just really loved it.
I'm obsessed with the truth. I'm obsessed with astrology.
It is, I am really honored to know that knowledge through the medium and the way it will go to the people. It's a really great thing to reach out to the masses.
My
Thank you so much.
namaste.